Big Ape City is Donkey Kong Land going out with a bang. It brings a slew of new ideas to the table, including 3 brand new level themes. Compare that to Chimp Caverns, the final world of Donkey Kong Country, which brought none. Chimp Caverns is fine, but there's a lot to be said about finishing strong, and Big Ape City manages that a lot better, and a lot more memorably than the game it's supposed to be a smaller version of. This is part 4, the final chapter of Overthinking Donkey Kong Land. Big Ape City looks a bit chaotic at first glance, but it's quite possibly the coolest looking overworld in the entire game. That said, there isn't a whole lot to say about it. We're seeing the tops of a handful of skyscrapers, some cranes I assume, and the blimp we arrived on. As for why the blimp says DK on the side, I don't know. It's a video game, who cares? I feel like Big Ape City is the most iconic location in the game. Everywhere else could easily have slipped into either DKC or DKC2 without anyone batting an eye, but Big Ape City is uniquely Donkey Kong Land. As for who lives here, we never really see any native inhabitants, so who knows. One source says DK and Diddy are no stranger to Big Ape City, another says it was taken over by the Kremlings. But I doubt it's the Kremlings, despite K. Rool making his last stand here, and I doubt it's the Kongs, despite the name. I do feel that it's the same city the original Donkey Kong arcade game takes place in, so for us to end this game by coming full circle like that is pretty cool. Come to think of it, it's entirely possible that Cranky himself told K. Rool to end the adventure here. He'd be intimately familiar with the city, and the highest points of the city in particular, so there'd be method to his madness for sure. The last thing I want to say is how Big Ape City, more than any other map, has this disorienting and intimidating feel to it. I think it's a combination of the height and the perspective, but it's the only overworld map where I feel like maybe the Kongs are in over their heads a bit. Okay, let's take a look at the levels that make up the last stretch of the game. Balloon Barrage is centered around the balloons. They serve as moving platforms that rise and fall as they inflate and deflate. Though they behave differently, I feel like Balloon Barrage's balloons are the precursor to those found in Red Hot Ride. Despite there being a decent bit of verticality here, this level is fairly straightforward and it's not too difficult. It's the first skyscraper level in the game and the first of 3 new tile sets. It's pretty cool, but there's not really a whole lot else to say about it. I think if given more memory to work with, it could be cool to have the sounds of traffic far below as ambient noise under the music and action, possibly even in lieu of music. Kong Crazy seems like a pretty lazy level name until you play it. You get the Kong letters deceptively early, which at the time feels like a relief, knowing that you're going to be able to save after you beat the level. Then you hit a weird looking switch, and you lose them all to create a bridge out of them. Honestly, I think it's kind of a stupid gimmick, but I'll give them points for creativity. Kong Crazy is also the first Zeppelin level theme in the game. I feel this tile set was the prototype for one that could have been planned for DKC2. That final screen with Screech's sprint and the Captain K. Rool fight was supposedly going to be a full sky-themed world at one stage. And just like how the cloud levels of Chimpanzee Clouds were the precursor to what could have been a tile set there, I feel the Zeppelin levels here could have been similar to levels set on the Flying Croc. I'm honestly not sure how the visuals could change. A part of me thinks the platforms could be a similar green to the Flying Croc, or maybe the same red as the girders from Donkey Kong's arcade debut, seeing as this whole world is a bit of a throwback to that. Either way, I think it could be cool to change the background to the canvas of the balloon part of the Zeppelin, as what we got instead is pretty jarring. Maybe have wind in the foreground and the shadows of the platforms against the balloon walls. Construction Site Fight is the first scaffolding themed level, harkening back to the original arcade game with its steel girders as both platforms and in the background. That tile set is the focal point here, though there is more emphasis on the steel barrels than we've seen in any previous level, as well as the best opportunity to ride one in the game. Come to think of it, the presence of those barrels could be a reference to the arcade game as well. The chain ropes kind of jump out at me too. They're clearly not anything special, but they look cool, and maybe they influenced the chains from Chain Link Chamber in DKC2. The only environmental detail for this level I'd like to see are that the girders are the same color as in the arcade game, and it could be cool if the scaffolding swayed in the wind a bit. There haven't been any new enemies for a while, and that's fine, but it got me thinking. If this game was in color, we'd probably be seeing new color variants of Critter, Crusher, and Claptrap in Big Ape City. Fast Barrel Blast takes us back to the Zeppelin. This level's the closest relative Donkey Kong Land has to levels like Snow Barrel Blast and Treetop Town. The background's busier than in Kong Crazy for some reason, which I'm gonna chalk up to it being a lower part of the ship. In the open sections where you're traveling by barrel, I feel like it could be cool to have the shadow of the skyline projected on the background, possibly even from the other side, with the setting sun tinting everything a burnt orange. Skyscraper Caper is interesting in that it brings back the ropes from Slip Slide Ride. Some pull you up while others pull you down. Because it's Game Boy, the ropes aren't distinguished by being blue or purple, and you just have to be careful to make sure you know which way a rope is going before you latch on. There's an exit portal right at the start that I missed, and it brings back those fucking snakes from Rigging Rumble. Something I noticed this game doing a lot is hide stuff behind other stuff, and that's probably best exemplified here. Actually, maybe not, but there are spots in this level where you can walk into the buildings, and it looks awesome. I think it could be cool to set this level at night, or the late evening, and have all the windows in the background lit up. Think about how cool the lights in Treetop Town looked. It'd be like that times 100. I know it would probably be asking a bit too much of the hardware, but if we could see people moving in some of the windows, silhouetted against the shades, maybe the flashing colors from a TV, or even the sounds of the TV coming in and out as you pass under different windows, that would be amazing. It could also be pretty cool if when you enter the buildings, the Kongs turn into silhouettes themselves. Be a nice little throwback, or throw forward, to the levels in Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze. Yet another barrel blast level. The central mechanic's in the name. Hit the nearby buttons and change the angle of the blast barrel. If we're following the precedent set in the last level, then it'd be night for this level. It could be cool if the skyscrapers in the background all had their lights on, and the haze of light pollution filled the sky behind it. I know it's not a popular opinion, but I kinda like the look of light pollution. There's areas in my city where the sky is this soft carmine red color at night, and there's something about that Neuromancer sky, a TV tuned to a dead channel look, that feels so alive and busy. And that's pretty much what I'd want from the environmental design here, for the city to feel alive and busy. We've talked traffic noises and such before, but now that the sun is down, I would want Big Ape City to truly come alive. I'd want to see spotlights rising from the ground and waving about the sky. I'd want to hear more traffic noises from below, hear people in their apartments. Like I said before, it might be asking too much of the hardware, but it'd be such a great way to ramp up the energy for the final fight. Anyway, let's keep going. Oil Drum Slums level design is what the skyscraper tile set was made for. You start at a low point on the leftmost of 3 skyscrapers and spend the level making your way to the top. As you get higher and higher, the skyscrapers in the background give way to sky. The gameplay focus is on the oil drums, which double as both platform and obstacle. Oil Drum Slum is a sequel to Oil Drum Alley in that way. It's a small detail, but this level is, as far as I can tell, the first appearance of boarded up doors and windows. Like I said, a small detail, but it does a lot to sell the personality of the level and to distinguish it from the others. The bonus levels bring us back to the underwater ruins and the ship rigging, and I love that little full circle touch. In stark contrast to the previous level, I think it could be cool to make Oil Drum Slum a darker, quieter level. Give it a noir feel with moody green lighting, long shadows, smoke or steam rising from the streets, barely anyone left in the buildings. The fires of the oil drums illuminating much of the level around it. The background could have that same light pollution, but maybe a bit dirtier, like a brown or deeper red. We've seen the charm Big Ape City has to offer, and now, in the final level, we're seeing the grim reality for many of its inhabitants. The final battle, K. Rool's Kingdom, brings us back onto the Zeppelin. It's the widest map for a boss battle that we've seen in this game, but there's nothing particularly interesting about it. You could make the argument that the K. Rool fight here is harder than his fight in DKC. The first phase is the same. He throws his crown, you bounce off his noggin. But after not 3, but 6 hits, he'll start running at you and trying to body slam you. This threw me off massively because I couldn't work out the timing of his jumps. Turns out it's deceptively easy. He doesn't jump until he reaches you, so all you've got to do is stand your ground, wait for him to jump, and then roll under him. Simple enough. Dodge him 6 times, and he goes back to the first attack, only faster. He takes off running almost as soon as he throws, so it's easiest to dodge the crown and land a hit on him in a single jump. 6 more hits and he's down. Roll credits. There's no cutscene or anything at the end, but it's a Game Boy game. You can't ask too much of it. I think if this game ever were remade, or if it released on the Super Nintendo, it could be cool if this level was a cross between the boss levels of DKC and K. Rool's first fight in DKC 2. So the cockpit of the airship, but full of DK's banana world. It's a bit of a stretch, but you could also make the argument that the location of this boss fight influenced the fight in DKC 2. I'm not gonna make that argument, but it's there for the taking if anyone wants it. As always, my attempt at piecing together some sort of narrative from the levels should be taken with a grain of salt, but here and there, I think I hit on some pretty cool ideas. Looking at the overworld map, the Kongs start quite a ways from the blimp that took them here. I feel that they stowed away on the blimp, and maybe got caught and had to jump out a bit earlier than intended, landing precariously on a walkway far up the side of a skyscraper. Maybe they did some damage to the blimp and caused some cargo to fall out. That would explain all the balloons in the level. Crossing from skyscraper to skyscraper, they make it back onto the Zeppelin, which may or may not be having some engine trouble. As for the Kong bridges, let's just chalk that up to the Kong's minds trying to make sense of machinery they can't comprehend. Realizing they can't reach the cockpit, where they assume K. Rool is located, they come out the other end of the balloon part and make their way down the scaffolding of a construction site. Maybe the Kongs saw K. Rool in the cockpit back in Monkey Mountains, and it was them trying to reach the cockpit that got them discovered and forced them to jump ship. Anyways, they use the scaffolding to get them back onto the Zeppelin. This time they're in the guts of the engine. It's chaotic and dangerous, and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to reach the cockpit from here anyway. So once again they jump ship. They cross the width of a frankly ridiculously chunky skyscraper to another construction site. This one looks suspiciously familiar, but the Kongs don't put too much thought into it. From there, they end up under the Zeppelin, halfway up a skyscraper in the bad part of town. They use the oil drums to work their way up and into the cockpit, where they finally reach K. Rool. K. Rool starts the fight in a familiar fashion, but soon whips out a new move he's been cooking up for the next time he gets a shot at them. It doesn't work, and so he resorts to resuming his first strategy, albeit in a much more frantic fashion. That doesn't work either. The Kongs win, get their bananas back, Cranky Kong presumably shuts the fuck up for a while, and K. Rool takes what he's learned and applies it to his next plan. Or, you know, something like that. Overthinking Donkey Kong Land is finally over. It was short, but hopefully sweet. I enjoyed making it, and I really enjoyed playing this game. This is something I never thought I'd say going in, but I can totally see myself revisiting this game at some point in future. Not for any new video or anything, just playing it again for the fun of it. The older I get, the more selective I'm forced to be with games that I say that about. So that's pretty much the best recommendation I can give it. Despite all its limitations, Donkey Kong Land manages to put out what I'll call a full-length effort, being only 2 levels shorter than DKC. It crams in a ton of new ideas, brings back a whole slew of old ones, and is a testing ground for a bunch of things that will show up in the next 2 mainline games. It pays its respects to the past, legitimizing the arcade in the canon, and boldly paves the way for the future, broadening the scope of what it means to be a Donkey Kong game. The music is dope, it's generally pretty fun, and most importantly, it has a lot of heart. You can see the love that went into making this game, and I think that's a vital part of why it still holds up to this day. That might sound a bit much, but I mean it. When a studio gives its devs a long leash, and those devs put their heart and soul into what they do, it always shines through in the game itself, and I think it's part of the reason I love video games so much. Anyways, I've waffled on plenty. Let's wrap this up. Donkey Kong Land is great. You should check it out. You guys are great. You should check yourselves out. That felt weird. Whatever. I love you all, and stick around because despite its incredibly slow start, Donkey Kong December still has some bananas up its sleeve. That was a fucking terrible joke. I'm sorry guys, I'm fucking exhausted. See you later.